Welcome to Value Gene Insight Conversations.
Today, we are going to explore a major shift, a fundamental structural shift occurring across the food industry.
We are examining how product reformulation has evolved. It has transitioned from what used to be an occasional research and development project into a permanent, highly complex operational necessity.
And for you, as decision makers and leaders in food manufacturing and distribution, this represents a critical challenge. You are constantly tasked with managing margins, protecting operational efficiency, and ensuring compliance in an environment where the rules of food manufacturing are continually shifting.
Our objective in this deep dive is to provide a comprehensive analysis of this landscape and detail how to build a sustainable operating model in response.
Exactly. We need to look at how organizations can systematically adapt to this pressure.
Before we begin, we would like to thank several contributors whose perspectives and feedback helped shape this study and strengthen its practical relevance. Special thanks to David Thomas, Charlie Chappell, Susan Bond, and Carrie Schroeder. We sincerely appreciate their support.
We really must recognize that reformulation has always been part of the DNA of food manufacturing. Historically, companies adjusted recipes in response to distinct episodic events.
Right, like a specific regulatory change or a temporary supply disruption.
Or a shift in the economics of a core ingredient. However, our research indicates that the current environment is fundamentally different from those historical patterns.
The requirements are piling up.
They are. The requirements placed on products now bind simultaneously rather than sequentially. They vary dramatically across different jurisdictions and even across different commercial customers.
Which is a massive operational headache.
Furthermore, they arrive with fixed, non-negotiable cutover dates alongside unprecedented expectations for verifiable lot-level proof.
Okay, let's unpack this. The central thesis we're observing across the industry is that reformulation is no longer about clearing a single, isolated hurdle.
It is not a one-and-done project anymore.
If we look back at the historical industry effort to remove partially hydrogenated oils, that was a massive undertaking, but it was largely a singular, unified mandate.
Yes.
Today, the formulation work is reopened far more frequently within what used to be a standard 3 to 4 year product lifecycle. We are seeing constant overlapping pressures.
Overlapping is the key word. When we model the macro view for the next 5-year horizon, we project that roughly 20 to 50% of large portfolio SKUs will face direct reformulation pressure.
20 to 50%. That is a staggering portion of a portfolio.
If you are managing a portfolio of several thousand products, we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of SKUs requiring active retuning.
And the constraint there isn't usually the chemistry.
No, the real issue isn't food science. The true bottleneck we observe is organizational alignment and decision closure.
Because reformulation cuts directly across procurement, quality, regulatory operations, and the commercial teams.
Precisely. And each of those functions carries entirely different risks and operational incentives.
Procurement wants cost stability above all else.
Operations demands throughput on the lines, and the commercial teams are heavily focused on consumer claims and taste profiles.
So when cross-functional decisions are delayed because those incentives are not aligned, the feasible options narrow rapidly.
They vanish. The time windows to secure new ingredients close. The operational capacity to run plant trials fills up.
And the financial impact of that hesitation is severe.
We see it clearly in the data. Companies are routinely taking a 5 to 15% hit on unit costs, alongside execution delays stretching 6 to 12 months.
That is no longer just the direct cost of the change itself.
It is the cost of being cornered into suboptimal operational paths, simply because the organization could not align quickly enough.
When we analyze why this bottleneck exists, we see a much heavier constraint system at play. We map this through 5 structural properties. The first is the rising complexity of multidimensional constraints.
The requirements are no longer linear.
Today, products are subject to overlapping requirements simultaneously. You have nutrition targets, stringent ingredient restrictions, cost limits, evolving sustainability expectations, and specific claim eligibility, all applying at the exact same time.
A formulation that fails on any single dimension is entirely unacceptable, even if it flawlessly satisfies the other 4.
And these constraints are becoming highly specific. They are transitioning from broad free-from principles to highly specific named additives and chemical thresholds.
We see this complexity clearly when comparing jurisdictions. We impartially note these differences as strict operational realities that global companies must navigate.
The regulatory divergence is striking.
For instance, as of February 2026, the United States currently has approximately 4,000 authorized direct food additives. That is about 20% higher than the European Union's roughly 3,300 authorized additives.
But the food contact substances are where it really splits.
Yes, the materials used in packaging that might migrate into the food. The gap there is much wider. The U.S. has authorizations for approximately 5,000 substances, compared to only about 900 in the EU.
So managing global or even multinational portfolios requires reconciling these vastly different constraint structures without fragmenting the supply chain into unprofitable micro-runs.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Even if you manage to navigate the governmental regulations, you run into the second structural property, which is non-uniform rule sets.
The profound increase in competing customer rulebooks.
Beyond government mandates, we see codified buyer standards driving deep fragmentation. Large retailers and food service operators are publishing non-identical standards that function as absolute conditions for doing business.
We can quantify this fragmentation quite clearly.
Consider that Panera's no-no list overlaps 85 to 90% with Whole Foods' banned ingredient list. However, Trader Joe's framework only captures 35 to 45% of the molecule-level bans instituted by Whole Foods.
The operational implications of that data are staggering. If you are a manufacturer trying to supply all three of those customers, you cannot easily create a single, efficient SKU.
You are forced into a corner.
You have to choose between creating separate inventory streams, which adds immense warehousing and changeover costs, or formulating to the strictest possible standard, which might price you out of the market entirely.
And that buyer-level divergence is compounded heavily by state-level jurisdictional divergence.
We must navigate an environment where some states prohibit specific additives while others do not. California, for example, has adopted broad bans covering multiple synthetic color dyes across separate statutes.
While other states are focusing on entirely different risk profiles.
Right. States like Illinois and Maryland have introduced statutory limits targeting heavy metal contaminants, specifically in baby food.
And parallel to the retailer and state-level fragmentation, we have commercial divergence driven by consumer expectations.
The consumer data is quite revealing here.
Data from 2025 shows that 65% of consumers want 100% natural claims on packaging. Yet only 31% prioritize non-GMO and 34% prioritize sugar-free.
It is a stark reminder that what consumers broadly state as a preference and what they actually prioritize at the grocery shelf are often two very different puzzles.
The combined effect of these fragmented retailer standards, state regulations, and dispersed consumer preferences means that creating a universal multi-channel SKU is becoming nearly impossible.
Which brings us to the third structural property, higher interaction density.
The domino effect of ingredients.
Exactly. Even if an organization successfully maps out all those differing rules, they encounter the reality that modern packaged foods are built as tightly coupled systems. We rely on a smaller set of highly versatile key ingredients that carry a heavy functional load.
Salt is a prime example of this domino effect. It is not just present for flavor.
Far from it.
Just to be thorough on the science here, salt controls water activity, which is the specific unbound moisture in a product that allows microbes to grow. It also manages microbial safety directly and dictates dough behavior in baked goods.
So reducing salt forces a cascade of secondary and tertiary adjustments across taste, processing characteristics, and vital safety margins. You cannot simply pull one thread without unraveling the entire formulation.
We observe similar cascading effects when companies transition away from petroleum-based synthetic dyes.
Natural color systems are frequently much less stable. They're highly sensitive to light exposure, heat during processing, and pH levels in the food matrix.
And they often require higher usage levels to achieve the desired vibrancy.
Which frequently introduces unwanted earthy or bitter flavor notes. So what originates in the commercial brief as a simple color swap immediately pulls shelf life testing, stability protocols, and flavor masking into the scope of the project.
And it is not just internal ingredients causing this density.
No. What's fascinating here is that even external packaging changes now drive internal recipe retuning.
We saw this with the wide-scale packaging shifts recently.
When the widespread phase-out of PFAS grease-resistant coatings occurred across 2024 and 2025, it fundamentally changed the internal environment of the packaging.
Just to note for clarity, PFAS refers to those synthetic forever chemicals traditionally used to keep things like pizza boxes and fast food wrappers from absorbing grease.
Right. When manufacturers removed those to comply with new regulations, the barrier properties of the packaging changed.
The oxygen, moisture, or grease barriers shifted.
Precisely. And those shifts can drastically accelerate the oxidation of the food inside or cause an unacceptable drift in texture over the product's shelf life.
As a result, manufacturers are being forced to adjust the food formulation itself, adding antioxidants or changing fat profiles.
Even when the actual food recipe was never the original target of the change.
Compounding all of this systemic complexity is the fourth structural property: narrower compliance time windows.
Acceptability now has strict time embedded within it.
In the past, you might have had flexible transition periods. Today, we are looking at multiple overlapping resets arriving as hard cutoffs.
Just a few examples affecting the current landscape include the new dietary guidelines finalized in late 2025, the updated FDA healthy definition requiring compliance by February 25, 2028, and a sweeping front-of-pack labeling rule expected in 2026.
These parallel clocks force cross-functional teams to meet multiple cut-in dates simultaneously.
And those compressed timelines immediately expose systemic capacity constraints within the food manufacturing ecosystem.
The theoretical science isn't the limiting factor anymore.
It is pure execution bandwidth. Analytical lab queues, pilot plants, commercial plant trial windows, and packaging graphics update slots are completely filling up.
We routinely see viable technical solutions fail, simply because they cannot clear the internal and external testing queues in time to meet the mandated compliance window.
If you wait for absolute certainty before booking pilot plant time, you will miss the regulatory cutoff.
Which makes the fifth structural property all the more challenging. Proof obligations are now deeply embedded into the manufacturing process.
Compliance must be demonstrably provable on a massive scale.
It is not enough to simply change the recipe. You must prove the provenance and safety of the new formula every single step of the way.
Lot-level traceability and rapid record retrieval are now mandatory conditions for operating. They are not merely back-office hygiene anymore.
We look at the FDA's food traceability rule under the Food Safety Modernization Act.
Specifically FSMA 204. With enforcement beginning July 20, 2028, that is a prime example of this shift. Products must withstand rigorous audit and regulatory scrutiny across highly fragmented supply chains.
Furthermore, these proof obligations strictly govern on-pack assertions.
If a brand wishes to retain a highly valuable nutrient content claim like healthy, under the new 2028 definition, it must hold the verifiable lot-by-lot documentation to support the reformulated recipe.
A reformulation is not considered complete until the organization can repeatedly, reliably, and instantly prove compliance. So, what does this all mean? How do organizations systematically solve this operational bottleneck when the complexity is this severe?
The core challenge is building a permanent, repeatable capability.
Moving away from those episodic reactions.
Exactly. Our analysis indicates that companies must build a sustainable operating model that connects cross-functional teams from the very inception of a project. We view this transformation in 4 distinct steps.
Step 1 is establishing reformulation as a strict portfolio discipline rather than an ad hoc necessity.
We recommend managing this capability across 3 tracks: value creation, risk management, and execution.
Value creation involves identifying where a necessary reformulation can actually be leveraged to strengthen consumer value or improve unit economics,
rather than treating it merely as a sunk cost for compliance. Risk management focuses on proactive mitigation for products in the portfolio that have fragile margins or severe single-source constraints.
Crucially, the execution track must be treated as a top-level enterprise directive. It must be sponsored directly by the C-suite and led through what we call a TechOps spine.
Yes, the TechOps spine is vital.
When we refer to a TechOps spine, we mean establishing a dedicated cross-functional bridge that formally integrates R&D, procurement, supply chain, and manufacturing into a single operational unit.
Commercial leadership must be explicitly aligned with this spine. That ensures critical resources and plant time are not diverted solely to new product innovation at the expense of necessary reformulation.
Which leads directly to step 2, systematically converting external and internal signals into clear portfolio implications.
We must map these external signals across two distinct time horizons, the near term of 1 to 2 years and the medium term of 2 to 5 years.
This involves translating consumer expectations, the overlaps in customer-specific requirements, and the impending regulatory pipeline into concrete SKU exposure.
We must give the organization a clear map of exactly what needs to change and by when.
Within the second step, we also have to fundamentally redefine the role of regulatory and scientific affairs.
Historically, regulatory teams often functioned as downstream validators. R&D would finalize a formula, and regulatory would check it for compliance.
That model is no longer viable in this environment.
Regulatory must serve as an upstream architectural constraint system. They must be the architects who define the parameters before R&D even begins their work.
Shaping choices and eliminating unviable chemical pathways early before significant capital and time are expended.
That architectural alignment leads directly into step 3, stress testing feasibility across the entire value chain.
Identifying a technically workable substitute in the laboratory is vastly insufficient.
We must rigorously assess sourcing feasibility, evaluating the fully landed cost of viable alternatives, the qualification lead times for new suppliers, and the exposure risks of relying on a single source.
And the agricultural price volatility to ensure the replacement ingredient can be supplied reliably at commercial scale.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we must also meticulously quantify the strict manufacturability impacts. This is a critical failure point for many organizations.
Economic trade-offs must reflect the reality on the plant floor.
We must project the potential throughput loss. For example, a substitution might work perfectly in the lab, but if it requires line rate reductions or longer sanitation changeovers, the gross margin erosion will be severe.
We must account for downtime, yield loss, and any required capital expenditures for new dosing equipment.
If plant operations are not deeply integrated into the feasibility stress test from day one, the company risks balancing taste and shelf life while entirely failing to protect the margin profile.
Finally, step 4 is prioritization, road mapping, and sustained execution. Once we fully understand the CU exposure and the operational feasibility, we consolidate this data into a product-level impact matrix.
We evaluate every exposed product along two critical axes: the potential gross margin impact and the overall revenue impact to the business.
Based on where a product lands on that matrix, we direct it into one of 3 action paths.
First, we have upside products. These require immediate action because moving early on or reformulation can create a distinct commercial advantage, perhaps capturing market share by achieving a clean label claim before competitors do.
Second, we have neutral or readiness products.
These require deliberate, disciplined preparation built into the standard R&D pipeline to avoid rushed, expensive execution down the line.
Third, we have downside risk products. A great example of a downside risk product would be a high-revenue flagship item that is heavily dependent on an ingredient facing imminent state-level bans.
That scenario demands aggressive, proactive mitigation.
It might involve exploring entirely new alternative technical paths, completely reassessing sourcing strategies, or making difficult commercial positioning adjustments to protect the overarching economics of the brand.
Exactly. These 3 paths are then converted into a sequenced 3 to 5 year roadmap.
A roadmap that provides clear milestones and strict governance regarding who holds the decision rights at every single stage.
From the initial bench trial through to the final commercial launch, it removes the ambiguity that causes those costly delays we discussed earlier.
It systematically clears the operational bottleneck.
This raises an important question for you to consider as we look beyond the immediate 5-year horizon. If profound market fragmentation, retailer divergence, and compounding regulatory rules make maintaining universal, static product specifications mathematically impossible over time, are we approaching a future where fixed recipes disappear entirely? We must consider whether the ultimate operational model of the future will rely on dynamic, algorithmic formulations, systems that adjust recipes batch by batch in real time, instantly responding to localized supply chain constraints, hyper-regional regulations, and daily ingredient cost fluctuations without human intervention.
Thank you for listening to Value Gene Insight Conversations. To deep dive, please see the show notes. For more on food industry topics, visit valuegeneconsulting.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If today's discussion resonated with you, please do not hesitate to reach out to us to continue this dialogue. Have a great day.